Chapter 11. The Incense Burner's Mysterious Power. Yuan Ming's heart lurched as a sudden heat flared along his right arm. For the past half-month, he had been confined to this dim, oppressive environment, his eyes gradually adjusting to the darkness. Now, his gaze fixed on the source of the warmth, a faint, bluish mark etched into his skin. The mark resembled an incense burner, its lines shallow and indistinct. Yet, before his eyes, it began to darken, its edges sharpening as if being carved anew. A faint glow pulsed from it, casting eerie shadows against the cavern walls. What in the heavens? Yuan Ming frowned, tracing the mark with his fingers. It neither burned nor itched, merely existed, silent and enigmatic. A thought struck him. He focused inward, summoning the meager thread of spiritual energy he had painstakingly cultivated over weeks. With deliberate care, he guided it to his fingertip and pressed it against the mark. The moment his energy made contact, the mark flared. A sudden, voracious pull yanked his hard-earned spiritual power into its depths, devouring it whole. Yuan Ming's breath caught. All that effort gone in an instant. Panicked, he attempted to reclaim his energy, cycling his blood and qi in desperation. But the mark held fast, its hunger insatiable. Just as despair threatened to take hold, warmth blossomed within the mark. A hazy light spilled forth, coalescing above his arm. His eyes widened as a small, earthenware incense burner materialized before him, cradled in the glow. It was no ordinary artifact, three-legged, twin-eared, and lidless, its surface adorned with intricate carvings. One side bore the yin-yang taiji symbol, shimmering with latent power, while the other depicted a celestial array of stars, their arrangement cryptic and profound. Atop the burner stood 3 sticks of black incense, one short, 2 long. Yuan Ming hesitated, then reached out. His fingers brushed the burner's surface, confirming its reality. The texture was smooth, cool to the touch, yet thrumming with something inexplicable. This is no illusion. He examined the incense sticks. They felt ordinary, though finer than any he had encountered before. Glancing back at his arm, he found the mark had vanished, leaving only a lingering warmth. Where did this burner come from? A fragmented memory surfaced, a turbulent river, his body battered by currents, his hand grasping blindly in the depths. His fingers had closed around something solid, something that radiated light. The incense burner. His pulse quickened. This was no mundane object. It had chosen him. Curious, he pressed his palm against the burner's surface. Heat surged up his arm, flooding his mind with clarity. The exhaustion of relentless cultivation melted away, replaced by razor-sharp focus. This treasure can restore my spirit. Emboldened, Yuan Ming struck a flame using the primitive method of friction and lit a scrap of cloth. Carefully, he touched the fire to one of the black incense sticks. A spark caught. The incense smoldered, releasing a wisp of fragrant smoke. The scent was unlike anything he knew, neither sandalwood nor pine, but something deeper, stranger. A single breath was all it took. His vision blurred. His thoughts scattered. Poison. Darkness swallowed him whole. Consciousness returned to the sound of hushed voices. Wild beasts. Yuan Ming jolted upright only to freeze. He was no longer in the cavern. Before him stretched an ornate desk of polished rosewood, its surface adorned with treasures. A dragon-carved inkstone, jade-handled brushes, and stacks of yellow-papered scrolls bound in silk. Am I dreaming? He looked up. The cavern had been replaced by a grand hall, its ceilings high, its pillars gilded. 4 figures clad in white robes stood in deference, heads bowed. Your Majesty, you've awakened. The voice came from beside him, a gaunt, smooth-cheeked man in embroidered robes, a horsetail whisk in hand. "Your Majesty?" Yuan Ming's gaze snapped to a nearby mirror. The reflection staring back was not his own. A youth in golden robes gazed at him, a five-clawed dragon emblazoned across his chest. Yuan Ming recoiled, nearly toppling the ornate chair he sat upon. The eunuch, for surely that was what the man was, dropped to his knees in terror. "This lowly one deserves death for startling your Majesty." The others followed suit, pressing their foreheads to the floor. Yuan Ming's mind reeled. This isn't a dream. The incense burner brought me here. He inhaled deeply, forcing calm. I am fine. Leave me." The eunuch hesitated but obeyed, ushering the others out with practiced deference. Alone, Yuan Ming examined his new body. The right arm bore the same bluish mark as before, pulsing faintly with warmth. "So the mark followed me." He prodded it, but nothing happened. Without spiritual energy in this body, he couldn't summon the burner. Frustrated, he turned his attention to the scrolls on the desk. If he was trapped here, he needed to understand his role. The first document detailed a province's plea for disaster relief after floods. The language was obsequious, drowning practical concerns in layers of flattery. Yuan Ming rubbed his temples. Politics. A sweet aroma distracted him. A lacquered box sat nearby, its lid adorned with avian motifs. He lifted it, revealing an assortment of delicate pastries, steaming, fragrant, and achingly tempting. After weeks of raw meat and hunger, the sight was irresistible. He devoured them without restraint, washing them down with a pot of tea. Only when the last crumb was gone did he lean back, sighing in satisfaction. Now, to figure out how to return. The incense burner had brought him here. Surely, it could take him back. But how? He studied the mark again, willing it to react. Silence. For now, he had no choice but to play the emperor and hope the burner's secrets would reveal themselves in time. Here is the retold story in proper American English grammar, maintaining the Xianxia, immortal hero, style and filling in any missing context logically. Chapter 12. The Dual Texts of the Nine Yuan Art. Yuan Ming shook his head and opened another memorial. This one was from a Ministry of Works official, reporting on the repairs to the Tianzhe Hall of the Evergreen Temple. Like the previous documents, it was filled with lengthy, tedious prose, leaving Yuan Ming utterly disinterested. Before he could even finish reading, he impatiently snapped the memorial shut and tossed it aside. Being an emperor isn't as easy as it seems. If it were me, I'd drag these officials spouting nonsense out and give them a good thrashing to teach them a lesson. Yuan Ming muttered under his breath. Rubbing his temples to refresh his mind, he opened a third memorial. This one was different, concise and to the point. It immediately reported an incident where an envoy dispatched to the southern border had been ambushed. Ah, a military official. No wonder the writing is so different from those pedantic scholars, Yuan Ming remarked. At the end of the document was the name General Yuan Kuchong of the Southern Garrison. Yuan Kuchong, that name sounds familiar. Have I heard it before? He frowned, about to delve deeper into the report for more clues when a soft, effeminate voice announced from outside. Your Majesty, the State Preceptor, Immortal Master Yu Hu, seeks an audience. Immortal Master Yu Hu. Judging by the title, he must be a cultivator. Yuan Ming's eyelids twitched, and his first instinct was to refuse. But then he reconsidered. He knew nothing about the relationship between the young emperor and this jade pot immortal. A rash refusal might arouse suspicion. Besides, my soul is merely possessing this emperor's body. Such a thing is beyond ordinary comprehension. There's no way this immortal master could detect it. After a brief moment of deliberation, Yuan Ming set down the memorial and said, "Grant him entry." The effeminate attendant acknowledged the command, and the palace doors swung open. An elderly Taoist priest in violet gold robes stepped inside, performing a ceremonial bow with his horsetail whisk. "Boundless blessings of the Heavenly Lord," he intoned. Yuan Ming observed the man carefully. The elder had a gaunt yet dignified face, his skin glowing with an almost ethereal vitality. His silver hair was tied in a topknot, secured by a golden crown adorned with cloud patterns. The intricate embroidery of his robes and the aura of regal mysticism around him commanded both reverence and awe. "State preceptor, you need not stand on ceremony. What brings you here today?" Yuan Ming asked, carefully measuring his words. "Eunuch Li mentioned that your majesty was unwell. This humble Taoist came to check on your health," Yu Hu replied, flicking his whisk. "This one is fine, just slightly fatigued." "Your concern is appreciated," Yuan Ming said, maintaining the emperor's dignified tone. "Your majesty's well-being is tied to the fate of the empire. We cannot take any risks." "Allow me to check your pulse," the Taoist insisted, stepping forward without waiting for permission. Yuan Ming's eyes narrowed slightly at the man's overbearing demeanor, but refusing outright might cause complications. Reluctantly, he extended his wrist. The elder's gaze briefly flickered toward an empty incense box on the desk before his fingers lightly pressed against Yuan Ming's wrist. A faint thread of spiritual energy seeped into his body, circulating through his meridians. "This old man really is a cultivator?" Yuan Ming's pupils contracted. He held his breath, silently praying the Taoist wouldn't detect anything amiss. After a moment, Yu Hu's expression shifted slightly. "State preceptor, what do you find?" Yuan Ming forced himself to ask. "Your Majesty's blood vitality is strong, but your spirit seems unsettled. Have you been resting poorly?" the elder inquired, opening his eyes. "Indeed, sleep has been elusive, and nightmares plague me." "Is it serious?" Yuan Ming replied vaguely. "Nothing to worry about. These are minor afflictions." However, the Taoist stroked his beard. "If your majesty would only heed my advice and begin cultivating the 9 yuan art, these issues would vanish. With spiritual power nourishing your body, such disturbances would never arise." "The what?" Yuan Ming feigned ignorance, though his interest was piqued. "The 9 yuan art is a secret technique of the Evergreen Temple, passed down only to our most elite disciples. It carries no risks and strengthens both body and soul. Why does your majesty keep refusing?" Yu Hu sighed. "This 9 yuan art, is it truly as miraculous as you claim?" Yuan Ming probed further, his curiosity growing. "Of course. It is a perfected method refined over generations by our sect's patriarchs. No other technique in the world can rival its ability to cleanse meridians and harmonize chi flow." The elder's voice brimmed with pride. "And how quickly does it accumulate spiritual power?" Yuan Ming pressed, his breathing slightly quickening. "Taoist methods emphasize steady progression, but our current sect master, Wufangzi, integrated a spirit-gathering technique into the 9 yuan art. Now, its cultivation speed rivals even demonic methods, yet without any of the backlash." Yuan Ming's heart raced. He rose and bowed deeply. "Since the state preceptor recommends it so highly, I shall begin cultivating this art at once. Please instruct me." Yu Hu was taken aback, scrutinizing the young emperor with newfound surprise. After a pause, his stern expression melted into delight. "Excellent. Truly excellent. Your Majesty has finally opened his heart to the Tao." This is a blessing from heaven. The elder beamed, producing a violet-bound manual from his sleeve. 9 yuan art, upper volume. Yuan Ming accepted it eagerly and began reading. Unlike the crude breath condensation technique he had encountered before, this text was extensive, over 10,000 words of profound teachings. The first section alone contained 13 layers, each corresponding to a stage of qi refining. Your Majesty, cultivation is no different from studying or nurturing one's health. Diligence is key. This art is a treasure of our sect, reserved only for direct disciples and the imperial lineage. Do not share it lightly, Yu Hu warned. But Yuan Ming was already engrossed, his eyes devouring the text. Your Majesty, do not rush. Memorize the Ko-Wei, mnemonic verses, first. Once you've internalized them, I will clarify any doubts. Before the elder could finish, Yuan Ming snapped the book shut. State Preceptor, I have memorized it all. However, there are parts one does not understand. Please enlighten me. Yu Hu's hand froze mid-stroke on his beard. You remember everything. Every word, Yuan Ming confirmed. Only then did he realize his memory was unnaturally sharp. When he had learned the breath condensation technique, he had retained it after a single reading. But that had been a mere 200 characters. Now, an entire manual was etched into his mind after one glance. Your Majesty, recite the verse after Heaven's Gate opens at Tianfu. The broken array descends to Tai Yuan. The Taoist tested. One passage through Jingku. The dragon leaps but does not return. Yuan Ming answered instantly. When spirit rushes to the grand void garden, intent anchors in the Dantian palace. Boyang does not cycle the remaining yin. Heaven's excess flows to earth's deficit. With each flawless reply, Yu Hu's astonishment grew. I had thought Your Majesty was merely a youth indulging in idle pleasures. Yet now I see you were simply concealing your brilliance. With such a gift, your cultivation will advance like a boat sailing downstream, effortless and swift. We'll see about that, Yuan Ming thought wryly. State Preceptor, I recognize terms like Tian Fu, Yun Men, Lai Ke, and Tai Yuan, their acupoints in the body. But what are the Grand Void Garden and Dantian Palace? Seizing the opportunity, Yu Hu explained. The acupoints used in cultivation are deeper than ordinary ones. Once you generate spiritual power, you will sense them. The Grand Void Garden refers to the sea of consciousness, the dwelling of the soul. The Dantian Palace is where spiritual energy gathers, located below the navel. Yuan Ming's eyes lit up that matched where the heat had pooled when he practiced the breath condensation technique. He eagerly asked more questions, and Yu Hu patiently answered each one. Soon, all his doubts were resolved. Just as Yuan Ming sat cross-legged on the throne to attempt cultivation, the mark on his arm suddenly pulsed. The warmth within it rapidly faded. A crushing exhaustion overwhelmed him. His eyelids grew unbearably heavy, and darkness swallowed his vision. Consciousness returned sluggishly. Yuan Ming rubbed his eyes and found himself back in the dim cave. His own body once more beneath his control. I'm back. He exhaled in relief. Before him sat the ancient green incense burner, 2 slender black incense sticks still inserted. The third had burned out, leaving only a dying ember. The cloth he had used to light them was now ash, his fingers scorched where the flames had licked them unnoticed. So, while my consciousness was in the Emperor's body, my real form remained motionless, completely unaware. He flexed his stinging fingers and gazed at the incense burner, deep in thought. Chapter 13. The Incense Burner's Secret. Yuan Ming examined his finger, relieved to find it unharmed. Ignoring the minor discomfort, he reached for the incense burner once more. At that very moment, The last ember on the black incense stick flickered out. A hazy glow shimmered, and his fingers passed straight through the burner as if it were an illusion. In the next breath, the green ceramic burner vanished entirely, dissolving into a streak of light that shot into the mark on his arm. Yuan Ming's mind, previously clouded, suddenly sharpened into clarity. He rolled up his sleeve and saw the green mark had reappeared, though now it lay dormant, no longer glowing. He traced the mark with his fingers, and memories of his time as the young emperor flooded back in vivid detail. So, the incense merely transported my consciousness into that boy's body for a time. Once the incense burned out, I was forcibly returned. He pondered this realization, a mix of awe and curiosity stirring within him. The experience was exhilarating. Yuan Ming, young and eager, couldn't resist the urge to try again. But his body was drained of spiritual energy. Without sufficient mana, summoning the incense burner was impossible. As wondrous as this artifact is, my priority must be cultivation. Only with enough mana can I truly master the hide fur technique. Steeling his resolve, he pushed aside his playful impulses and settled into a meditative posture, preparing to cycle his qi. Yet as he began, a thought struck him. The 9 origins method, that old Taoist Wang imparted, gathers spiritual energy far faster than the crude, blood qi art. Why not try it? The two techniques were fundamentally different, however. He had no way of knowing whether the mana cultivated through the 9 origins method could even fuel the hide fur technique. No matter. I'll test it first and see. Decision made, Yuan Ming closed his eyes and focused, silently reciting the incantations of the 9 origins method. Before long, the acupoints across his body began to open. Spiritual energy from the outside world seeped in, transforming into warm currents that flowed through his meridians. The 9 origins method actually uses all of my acupoints to absorb energy. He was stunned. The blood qi art had only utilized a handful of major points, like the bubbling spring at the soles of his feet and the 100 meetings at the crown of his head. The sheer number of acupoints employed by the 9 origins method made it incomparably superior. He continued his meditation, drawing in more energy. At first, the absorption was slow, but as he maintained the cycle, the influx grew swifter, smoother, as if his body had been made for this. Soon, his meridians swelled with spiritual energy, nearing their limits. Unsure whether this was normal, Yuan Ming pressed on, guiding the energy through his body until it formed a clear, rushing current far more substantial than the wispy streams produced by the blood qi art. He directed this current through a full cycle before finally guiding it downward, toward his dantian. Both the 9 origins method and the blood qi art shared the same foundational principle. Absorb energy. Cycle it, then condense it into mana within the dantian. Yuan Ming watched the energy intently, fearing it might dissipate again. But his worries were unfounded. The spiritual current breached his dantian effortlessly, settling inside without resistance. It worked. Just like that. He was elated. The obstacle that had plagued him for half a month under the blood qi art had vanished without a trace. This was entirely due to the 9 origins method. This technique was a true cultivation art, leagues beyond the crude blood qi art, so much so that comparing the two was meaningless. No wonder that old Taoist Wang guarded this method so jealously. What Yuan Ming didn't know was that the 9 origins method was a peak foundational cultivation art from the Great Jin Empire's evergreen sect. Even inner disciples of the sect rarely had the privilege of learning it. Its insights into cultivation far surpassed anything the crude blood qi art of the southern borders could offer. Taking a deep breath, Yuan Ming resumed his meditation. The energy in his dantian stirred restlessly, like an untamed stallion threatening to run wild. He recalled the mantra, "Spirit enters the void, will anchors the dantian palace." Focusing his mind entirely on his dantian, he observed as the energy within grew scalding, shimmering as if on the verge of ignition. He remained calm. The Taoist priest had once explained that this sensation signaled the transformation of spiritual energy into true mana. Chanting the 9 origins method silently, he stoked the blazing energy, guiding it through the final refinement until, at last, it condensed into a wisp of pure mana. Even in mana conversion, the 9 origins method is far superior. Rather than continuing his cultivation, Yuan Ming channeled this newly formed mana into his finger and pressed it against the green mark on his arm. Everything strange that had happened to him today stemmed from this mysterious incense burner, especially his unexpected acquisition of the 9 origins method. He couldn't resist the urge to summon the burner again, to see if further secrets awaited. As expected, the mark emitted a pulling force, devouring the wisp of mana. A green light flashed, and the divine incense burner materialized before him. Relief washed over him. This confirmed his suspicion. The burner wasn't a consumable item. The mark was its anchor, and as long as he fed it mana, he could summon it at will. Examining the burner closely, he suddenly noticed something odd. The green sensor was identical to before except for the yin-yang taiji symbol on its surface. Once vibrant, it now lay dull and lifeless. Frowning, Yuan Ming ran his fingers over the symbol, even attempting to infuse it with mana. Nothing happened. The taiji must be linked to some mechanism within the burner. His gaze shifted to the 2 remaining black incense sticks inside. Based on his earlier experience, lighting one would allow him to traverse space and possess another's body. With only 2 sticks left, he had 2 more chances. Yet the burner's mysteries ran deep. If he couldn't fully grasp its workings, he'd never feel at ease. After much deliberation, Yuan Ming gritted his teeth and lit a scrap of cloth, holding the flame to one of the incense sticks. But no matter how long he held the fire to it, the black stick refused to ignite. What's going on? Last time, it lit almost instantly. He tried the second stick with the same result. Strange. Does the burner require certain conditions to activate? His eyes returned to the dim taiji symbol. Perhaps the incense can only be lit when the taiji is bright. Beyond this theory, he had no other leads. Then, his stomach growled violently, hunger gnawing at his focus. Enough. This artifact's secrets won't be unraveled in a day. With a sigh, he set the matter aside. Holding the burner, he pondered how to return it to his body. Previously, it had vanished on its own. He had yet to learn the method to recall it consciously. The moment the thought arose, the green burner turned translucent, dissolving into a wisp of light that streamed back into his arm, reforming the mark. A treasure indeed. Yet even the most miraculous treasure couldn't fill an empty stomach. Rising, he fetched a hide-wrapped bundle from the corner, revealing 5 or 6 wild fruits, his remaining provisions. The meat in the cave was long gone, and without the hide-fur technique, venturing outside to hunt was suicide. These meager fruits would have to sustain him. I must master the hide-fur technique before these run out. Devouring 1 fruit, he barely quelled the hunger gnawing at his gut. Without delay, he sat cross-legged and resumed cultivating the 9 origins method. Spiritual energy gathered around him, pouring into his meridians. His dantian's mana reserves grew steadily. 5 days later, Yuan Ming sat in the cave, his face gaunt, lips cracked from thirst and hunger. A single fruit a day was barely enough to sustain life, but the 9 origins method's progress had been remarkable. Spiritual energy converged from all directions, flowing through his acupoints and meridians before refining into mana. By midday, a small vortex of mana had formed in his dantian. At last the mana vortex. According to the elder, Forming this vortex meant his foundation was stable enough to attempt the hide fur technique. Eyes snapping open, Yuan Ming eagerly draped the white ape pelt over his shoulders and began chanting the incantation. As mana flowed, the pelt shimmered with pale light, then moved slithering over his body like a living thing. Countless hair-thin tendrils emerged from its inner surface, piercing his skin. Clenching his fists, Yuan Ming endured the needle-like agony. Compared to the elder's forced activation, self-casting the technique was far less painful. Soon, the pelt fully encased him, transforming him into a white-furred ape-man. Raw power surged through his limbs. Looking down at his furry form, Yuan Ming exhaled in relief. After 20 days, he had finally cast the hide fur technique on his own. He was no longer powerless. True, his famished body couldn't match the strength he'd wielded before, but that hardly mattered. In 5 short days, he'd gained enough mana to master the technique. For now, that was enough. Thank you for listening to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to support us and give us more motivation to upload new videos.